Well, the federal jury trial for the man accused of carrying out the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history is now underway. 50-year-old Robert Bowers allegedly killed 11 worshipers inside the Tree of Life synagogue in 2018. That's in Pittsburgh. During opening statements yesterday, prosecutors told the jury Bowers was motivated by his hatred of Jews. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. So Lexie Rigden is joining us now. She's a criminal defense attorney and has been following this case for us, and also a personal friend of mine, which I should sort of point out in full disclosure. So it's very good to see you, Lexie.
Good to see you too.
So, there's been a period of time that has gone by now, but I think we all remember the immense impact that this crime had on the community of Pittsburgh, but then across the country. We started all talking about the impact of anti-Semitism and the rise that we'd been seeing. Can you describe to us what the opening statements were like yesterday? What were each side? What was the argument coming from each side?
Well, predictably, the prosecution's opening statement was just about how gruesome and horrifying the crime was. They played 911 calls where actually somebody who was murdered in that synagogue was saying, "I'm scared to death," before the phone went dead. So that was what was expected. And they were just going on about basically the crime scene itself and his blatant, unapologetic anti-Semitism. What I found more interesting in terms of the defense, because there's no question that he did this, is that his defense attorney, who's very skilled. I mean, she's represented a lot of people, distasteful people in our society, the Unabomber. She said there's no question that he did it, but she wanted the jury to be questioning, to just think about his motive and his intent, which I thought was interesting because that's not really a defense. That's more like an excuse as opposed to a defense. But she's essentially saying that he was a gun owner. He's been a longstanding anti-Semite, but basically that he was radicalized online, which again, that's an excuse. It's not a defense, and there's no insanity defense here. So even she said that there's no doubt there's not going to be a reasonable debate that he's the one that committed these crimes, but she's setting the stage for sentencing to try to save his life.
That is so interesting, which brings me to my next question. Certainly the death penalty would be on the table. What is the likelihood that the prosecution would seek that, or perhaps not seek it?
Well, they are definitely seeking it. And in fact, the defendant had offered to plead guilty in exchange for life in prison, and the federal government said no. So that's why we're going through what almost seems like an exercise in futility a little bit, because they have to get through the guilt phase. They have to prove his guilt, even though it's pretty much, he's guilty. He did it. I mean, even the defense attorney is saying it, but they have to get over that hump so that they can then get to the penalty phase. And that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of the jury deciding what his fate is going to be.
And if he gets the death sentence, is there any sort of precedent being set if that should happen?
The death penalty has been around in our country since its founding. But it's not used that frequently in federal cases. And there was also a moratorium on executions under the Biden administration. There were far more executions under the Trump administration. What I think might come as a result of this is a hate crime. It's anti-Semitism. And that was one of the basis for the government seeking the death penalty, the fact that this was carried out in a place of worship. And so that might set the stage later on for future cases where there is a hate crime element for the government, if they're successful here, to be more willing to pursue the death penalty in those cases.
I imagine one of the biggest challenges for the defense attorney is picking a jury. I mean, there was wall-to-wall coverage of this case when it happened, right? This massacre when it happened. As you point out, even, his own attorney can't really get around the fact that he did it and that he's an anti-Semite. How challenging, what sort of juror do you look for to put on a jury for a case like this?
Well, there's no doubt. It's always an issue in paneling an impartial jury in a high profile case. And this is the type of case where, I mean, every murder is distasteful, but this has a lot of even more heinous elements that up the ante. It's not that they can't impanel jurors who they have to find people that have not heard about the case. That's not what's required, but they have to find jurors who not only can be impartial, but are also willing to impose the death penalty if it's warranted, and juries who are able to sit for a trial that could last to the middle of the summer. So it's not easy even to impanel a jury when it's a high profile case, let alone all those other elements that you put on top of that. But they were successful. They did find their jury, and the trial is now underway.
Indeed. Lexie Rigden, thank you so much.
Thanks, Anne Marie.